Hi there. I am back and ready to talk a little bit more about what else we can do with our balls. So today is again a bit of an experiment as we figure out how to move through these practices and use a camera and our lights. Hi Kristen, thanks for tuning in. I've been talking a lot about the balls and how to get started. And one of the things I've said a lot is just hop into it, just get started. Hi, Megan. And so I want to do a little bit more around that. Oftentimes I hear people don't get started because they're just afraid that they don't know what they're doing. It is a little bit uncomfortable, maybe holding up your upper body. As we're building strength, things can just be a little fatiguing. And it's just a little bit awkward. So one of the things that I did in my house was I actually created a space just for rolling that's not covered in dog hair, right? Like that isn't filthy, where I'm not, on the floor in that main area of traffic. So if you have a yoga mat, that could be great. If you have a spare bedroom or just a room in your house that is a little bit more peaceful, that can be great. I'm rolling in the morning and in the evening, and I've tried multiple things. I do have a spare room where I am right now that I call my therapy room, and so I've got lots of tools and toys in here to play with. However, we got rid of our couch because we never have time to hang out on the couch anyway, and so I have my mini trampoline and my rollers and lots of things out there, and so the kids are always bouncing and we're rolling, and we do a lot of family time in that way. Even hula hooping. I hula hooped this morning for 10 minutes after my 20 minutes of rebounding. So just kind of creating a space that feels good for you, because you're not going to do it if you don't have a lovely space to be in. And a mat is going to be really helpful, right? So something that is great for your hips and your elbows as you're holding yourself up, that just kind of supports you in some way. Another thing to talk about is where we really shouldn't be using the balls, right? So I've given you an idea of a couple of different balls. Some balls are softer than others. This is a really squishy ball. So this ball we can use everywhere. We can use it on top of our tailbone, sitting on the ball, getting into the pelvic floor. We can go into the top of the pelvis bowl, even like pushing into the pubic bone, and that's going to be totally okay. Whereas some other balls are harder. They're made with a softer outer portion, which is what I love about them. They are safer to get near the bones. However, we don't really want to be like directly on the coccyx. So this is totally new. We'll see how we can move around here. So here at the base of the sacrum, we have the coccyx. And we don't want to put something hard directly on the tip of this bone, right? That won't be good in the long run. So avoiding the tip of that bone with harder tools is going to be ideal. You can definitely get in and around the tailbone, but on the tailbone, not so good. Also, another area to consider is the trachea, right? Like right in this area. I will actually use the Courageous ball rolling up the chest and through the neck. I feel really comfortable with that for my body personally. However, definitely don't want to be going over this area with a harder ball. Another area to consider is the inguinal ligament. So here in the hip, when we flex at the hip in that crease, there's a ligament called the inguinal ligament. And for a lot of folks that I work with, they've actually had inguinal hernia repairs. And so we don't want to use the balls on the inguinal ligament or on a hernia repair. A lot of people have mesh there, and so that's there to create stability and structure to that area. So we don't want to mess with that. We can work around it. But we don't want to work on the mesh specifically. Another thing is when we have a split here in the abdomen. So for some people after pregnancy, their abdomen here is pulled apart, and so they'll have a bit of a hole. And when we have a big hole there, we really want to be respectful of the tissue always as priority. So for that, we can work from the outside in, really feeding the fascia into these places to create softening and not have so much pulling, because this is from tension, right? It's been pulling. So how can we bring it back in? So those are just a couple of things right off the top of my mind that we want to be careful with. Other things though, you know, we can work really intently on, like C-section scars. You know, we can work a C-section scar and we don't have to be as mindful of it as, say, a hernia repair. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the piriformis. So I have several clients right now who are having a lot of piriformis issues, sciatic pain. Maybe you've heard of people talk about having like numbness down their leg into their knee, tension in their glutes. And so what I find is that when the piriformis is super tight, because it is kind of a stabilizer muscle, that's a good sign of weakness and imbalance, right? So if we can kind of find out what surrounding tissues are really tight and weak, we can really kind of address the piriformis that way. For some people, it can be really nice to get in with a ball and soften directly on the piriformis and they'll find relief. Whereas with other people, that can actually be really aggravating. That could actually make their symptoms a lot worse. So for this, it's all about listening to your body. And that's always going to be the most important thing in all of these practices. How do you listen to your body and honor your body where it is? For one thing, if it is something you cannot breathe through, it's too aggressive. So I'm no longer of this no pain, no gain mentality. I totally was there. I admit it. I was one of those people, elbow in so deep, no pain, no gain, you know, suck it up, buttercup. And I just know better now. So it doesn't need to be no pain, no gain. Oh, you know, I just thought of another place that we want to be mindful of, the xiphoid process. So let's see Mr. Bones here. I need help naming the skeleton. So if you got some good ideas here, we can take off his lovely shawl, scarf. This bone right here, right at the tip of the sternum, this we don't want to put pressure on with a hard ball. So this would be totally appropriate to work with the corgus, the softball. We can get up working into the diaphragm here. This is great for back pain, getting into this area. However, not a hard ball. Hi, Anya. Thank you for joining us. So back to the piriformis. I want to try and see if I can share my computer screen with you so I can give you a little bit more insight into the piriformis. So we'll see if this will work. I'm going to enlarge this on my screen and we'll see what we can do. So I always find that if you can really figure out what things are for, that can really help. So I'm just gonna take this off. Can I switch directions? Oh, I can't switch directions. Okay, so maybe I can do it this way. Okay, so here we see the gluteus maximus, and this muscle here, it helps to extend the hip. So when you're walking, the leg to the back is an extension. So extending happens here in the glute. It also laterally rotates and abducts the thigh and the hip joint. This muscle can become really long and weak from excessive amounts of sitting. So you've probably heard sitting is like the new smoking. That is a big deal here. I'm going to take off a layer, and here we're going to find the gluteus medius. Let's see, maybe I can point it on this side. Gluteus medius here. So what is this, Megan? I like Slim Jim for a name. Hey, I like Slim Jim too. That's great. So this muscle here is a glute medius, so it's just under that gluteus maximus, and it medially rotates and abducts the thigh. So medially rotates means you're turning your foot and your knee towards the center. And as we take off another layer, we're going to find the gluteus minimus. So there's actually 3 gluteal muscles. This also medially rotates and abducts the thigh and hip. So all of these muscles are really working with that extension and rotation and abduction. And here, this guy, this is the one, right? So let's see if I can bring it in. This is the piriformis. Now, for some people, their piriformis is tight and it's crushing down on the sciatic nerve. Let's see, I can actually turn on my nerves here. Turn on a layer. So this here is the sciatic nerve. This muscle can get tight and really crush down on this nerve. And for some people, actually, they've found that the nerve actually runs through the middle of the muscle belly. So when this gets tight, it can cause a lot of like tension, or not tension, like tingling. Yeah, tingling, a lot of sensation down the leg, a lot of pain down the leg. So today I want to talk a little bit about how we can take some pressure off the sciatic nerve. And for some people, rolling will be helpful because it's going to loosen this up. And for some people, it's going to be a little aggravating. Now, this muscle also laterally rotates and it transversely abducts. So when the hip is flexed, it abducts from the body. So let's see. I can show you some of those movements here. Dun, 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 dun. So let's see. So extension is going to be hip back, okay? So when the hip goes back, this is an extension. When the knee is rotating out, this is going to be a lateral rotation. And when the knee is going in, this is going to be medial rotation. So knee and foot is going in, medial rotation. And then abduction is coming out to the side. And transverse abduction is when the hip is flexed and we're coming out to the side. So these are all of the actions that these muscles are doing. And that can be kind of helpful, especially when you are having issues, because it'll give you an idea of why things are irritated, right? Like, why is it that when I go for a walk, I have this pain? Okay, well, what muscles are in action there? What is moving? What could be being irritated? So I'm gonna show you first a couple of stretches. See if I can bring this down. This is so fun. Figuring out how to be in the camera here. So one of the first things that I really, really love is just creating a little bit of mobilization here. So if you bring your feet just a little more than shoulder width apart. So your feet are not hip width apart. They're just out of that midline. So a little bit out. They're a little bit out. And then we're just gonna like windshield wiper the knees. And by windshield wipering the knees, we're just creating a little bit of mobilization back there. And it does add like an active stretch. And it can just feel really good in the low back. Sometimes I'll just lay on the floor at the end of the day and just mobilize, just relax. I love the feeling of this movement. It's really great for my particular areas of tightness. For some people, from here, they might do like a cradling of the leg. That's a really popular one. For me, and for people with history of low back pain, I really worry about this technique because if you are collapsing in your back, it could just not be so great. So if you can gracefully, and if you're strong enough, you can sit up nice and straight and cradle your leg. This can be a really lovely stretch to get into the piriformis. But again, you need to be strong enough that you keep your back straight. If you're like slouching in and doing something weird, this is not effective. So nice straight spine. And another great option would be to cross this foot over the opposite knee, come down, and engaging your core, flattening your back, bending at the hip. You can hold on to this leg and just soften into this. And if this feels benign and you don't feel like you're getting much stretch, you can add in a little bit of resistance here into the knee. Now, a really important thing to think about when it comes to stretching is what we call the stretch reflex. So nowhere ever have I ever heard anybody honoring the stretch reflex. I remember when I was a kid being in gymnastics training, and like they would have us sit on the wall and do the splits, and they'd have somebody come and sit on your back to pile drive you into the ground. That is not honoring the body. It's not honoring the stretch reflex. When the stretch reflex is engaged, actually, what happens is the body goes into resistance. And so now, instead of softening and opening and expanding, it's actually tightening and protecting. So I like to advise people to stretch like a senior citizen, stretch in a way that allows you to soften into it, relax into it. You're not at an edge. So you can actually come kind of to an edge and then back off a bit and just soften into it. So those are a couple of ideas for just nice light stretches. From there, I like to start with alpha ball. I like the alpha ball because it's bigger and you don't have to get in super deep to start, right? Like this ball, it's more like a forearm, right? So not super deep, but this could be a lot for some people. So starting by just getting into the hip, you can come up onto your side and just see what you find. I like to actually get the ball right up to the edge of my hip bone. So hip being my leg, actually. So the femur, where it attaches into the pelvis, there at the attachment site of those lateral and medial rotators. And then also get all the way up into the top of the ilium. So you saw where the minimus and the medius were there at the top of the hip. So if you look at that on Mr. Bones here. So let's see. I'm going to use a smaller ball, for example, just for visual reasons. Here at the top of the ilium, we had those muscles that were layered. So we had the minimus and the medius that were on top of each other here. So rolling along the top of the hip and then bringing it down and kind of along the edge of the femur here. and everything in between, right? I roll all the way down here and all the way up. So by addressing the muscles that are all around the piriformis, we can kind of indirectly work on softening the piriformis. And so this is a great way to get into that area without causing more harm, right? Because for some people, that sciatic nerve is so irritated that really getting in and digging into it is only going to make it worse. It's just going to make it more inflamed and more pain. So we want to think about bringing in fresh blood and nutrition to the muscle, and we want to think about mobilizing lymph and all these things with rolling so that the body's getting fresh oxygenation and nutrition and elimination of toxins, and it's really creating an environment of healing. That's what we're doing when we're using the balls. We don't want to go in and necessarily make something worse by adding a lot more irritation. However, sometimes we don't know until we get in there and we go, ooh, that might have been too much. So if you find after you roll that you are more sensitive or you have more pain and not like a whew, wow, I feel a lot looser and that was intense, but like, ooh, I feel damaged, like I feel hurt, I feel injured, you probably overdid it. So you might wait a day or two and allow things to heal, or just I want to say tone it down, you know, allow things to soothe a little bit before you go in again. Definitely don't need to go in and continue rolling on something that is feeling aggravated. That won't be in your best interest. So anyways, I hope that gives you another place where you can start using your ball, just freeing up the mobility of your hip. I invite you to do both sides. And then just notice, how does it feel? What do you notice? What feels different? Do you notice that your back is laying closer to the ground? Do you feel like you have more movement and mobility in your hips? One thing that you don't hear a lot of people talk about is that emotions are actually stored in the tissue. And so it would not be unusual at all for you to feel anger or sadness or to move things emotionally when we start getting into the tissues. So keeping in mind to really stay connected to your feeling, staying connected to if there are any emotions bubbling up, and really honoring them, seeing them, feeling them, allowing them to move through you will allow you to heal at the deepest level. And I think that is really the answer. I think that's really the answer. I think that a lot of our dis-ease, a lot of our pain is symptomatic from our mind and our emotions. So anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I am absolutely open to feedback. So if you have any feedback for me, I'd love to hear it. And let me know what you think. Let me know how it feels. I did get these balls linked on my website. So if you go to wholebodyrobbie.com, there is a resources tab in the top, and you can drop down and you'll find actually the kit. So I ended up posting the kit. That way you have all the tools. There's a double pack of Alpha, double pack of the Plus, a double pack of the therapy balls, and the Gorgeous ball. So this big, juicy, delicious ball that I love to use in the abdomen and the diaphragm. So you can find those there.